you touched on a very important issue here, which is something that has become, I think, probably a very overlooked part of our electoral process in this country, is how much money and the kinds of money that a lot of our judges are getting, whether at the federal level, at the state level. And when it comes to corporate special interests, I mean, everybody's aware of just how corporate bought Amy Coney Barrett is to be on the Supreme Court. But I don't think people really understand that this trickles down throughout the entire judicial system. And today it is systemic to the point of, I try to tell people the best way that I can explain what corporate special interest does to our society is no different than, let's take a step back to the 1980s and the 1990s. You've got the Zenith stereo system. You've got a whole bunch of different stuff. And when you look behind the TV, you've literally got 50 wires and cords literally entangled amongst each other. You don't even know where to begin or how to unwind it.
Jason's office still looks like that.
There you go. And so that to me is not just our electoral system, but that's really our judicial system. And big money seems to be what is dominating in a way that I don't think people are really grasping. You mentioned the Federalist Society and the lengths that they are going to in order to basically, I think they're just trying to use you as an example. They are making an example.
Well, they don't want anyone else to be doing this. Correct. They don't want anybody else.
They're weaponizing.
I was just going to ask you, they've never paid. Chevron has still not paid, right? Like that's the thing. They still haven't complied with their judgment.
They owe the money and they won't pay. And now, they're spending a lot of money, but not to pay the judgment to the people they poison. They're spending the money on law firms to attack those who held them accountable. I mean, it's an outrage. And, but it's look, let's be frank here. We're not naive. This is a corporate playbook invented by Chevron, used by the entire fossil fuel industry to try to intimidate people into not challenging them. For their pollution and the harms they are causing our planet, so they can try to wrest a few more years of profits out of this dying industry by intimidating lawyers and intimidating human rights defenders. That's their calculation, and they think they can get away with it. It's up to us to make that not work.
Right. It reminds me of that movie Class Action, where they had figured out that it was cheaper to just have people die and sue than to actually fix the car. So they've actually calculated that it's more efficient for them to spend their money going after you than it would be to pay what they owe.
But it's my job and the job of those who care to make sure that calculation doesn't turn out how they hope it does. In other words, to raise the cost to them of this kind of outrageous behavior to such a degree that it actually makes it worth it to pay the judgment rather than continue to attack the lawyers. But it's a challenge, no doubt.
What do we do?
Yeah, well, we have a question from Jamie Friend. Is there, obviously the Supreme Court, that's a whole other issue, but she mentions the ACLU. Are there any major organizations that are speaking out on your behalf? I haven't noticed any major political figures speaking out on your behalf, aside, obviously, like I said, from Susan Sarandon and Marianne Williamson. It doesn't really seem like I've seen that many people really putting this front and center. Are there any organizations that are doing their part to try to back you up in this circumstance?
Well, we need more support. There's no doubt, but we have gotten a fair amount of support as of late, last 2-3 months. I mean, several human rights groups have written a letter to the DOJ asking for them to review the case, including Amnesty International, Global Witness, Amazon Watch, a bunch of really big environmental and human rights groups. Apart from that, 6 congresspersons, including AOC, Jim McGovern, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Rashida Tlaib, and Jamie Raskin, have signed a letter to Merrick Garland demanding a review of the case. 68 Nobel laureates have demanded the case be dismissed, and really hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers have spoken out and filed all sorts of complaints against Judge Kaplan. So we have support. We need to grow that support. But I think you raise an issue when you say you haven't heard of it. Well, I think one reason why many people haven't heard of this case is it's being ignored by the big media. I mean, the New York Times reports on human rights violations all over the world. My apartment is a 30-minute walk from their newsroom, and they've never sent a reporter here. I'm a Harvard Law grad. I was in the same graduating class as President Obama. Not that that means anything, except for this point. Wouldn't you think someone who came out of Harvard Law, who's won the biggest environmental judgment ever and has been locked up in a Chevron prosecution for almost 2 years in a misdemeanor? I'm sorry. You can hate my guts. That's a newsworthy story for the New York Times. Where the hell are they? Do your job. You know, I have reporters flying over here from Europe, 4,000 miles from Germany to interview me in my living room. New York Times, again, a 30-minute walk away. They don't come. So that's why you haven't heard of it.
Well, yeah, they're beholden to the same people that are prosecuting
Exactly.
you. It's all the same people.
And this is a great point. You know, when people wonder about, you know, what stopped Obama, Jamie Dimon and a few other people is what stopped him. It's very easy to get seduced by the allure of Wall Street and everything that can come with it. And I don't think people really grasp what that means. I mean, I could tell people to watch the movie The Devil's Advocate, and that in a way just kind of, you know, but it kind of just gives you an idea of how even the most well-intended person can be overwhelmed by the whole prospect of becoming, you know, one of the masters of the universe, if you will, if you simply turn a blind eye to all the atrocities that those that make you that put you in that position are committing on a daily basis. The people who are willing to say, no, I am not taking this, I'm going to fight this. That's why we were talking right before you came on about the benevolence of sorts of Kashama Sawant out in Seattle. You know, the fact that she is willing to challenge power in a way that almost nobody else in this country is willing to do, not even Bernie Sanders, I think really speaks to the fact that it's so easy, it seems like, to buy people off. I mean, everybody has a price, but you know what? When somebody like Jeff Bezos decides that he doesn't want to pay for his failed investment, he just buys off a United States senator to basically write legislation to say, yeah, he's getting a $10 billion subsidy. Oh, and by the way, when I get that money, I'm going to go buy the biggest major movie studio in Los Angeles. So to me, it's the corruption within the system is embedded in so many different ways. Your case just happens to be one that is really caught in the crossfire of big industry that will not tolerate under any circumstances getting in the way of their bottom line.
Yeah, you said something really interesting that I caught in an interview that you did, and I wrote it down. I actually had to go back and listen to it because I put little quotes on it, and I thought it was really cool. And you said that what was going on in Ecuador is this idea of privatizing profits but socializing costs. And I thought that that was really, really like clever. And I was wondering if you could sort of just explain that. I mean, I understand what you were talking about, but in terms of the case, if you could talk about how that works.
By the way, if anyone wants to help, go to donzigerdefense.com. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. No, that's good. Yeah.
You can learn more about the case. You can donate to the Legal Defense Fund, or just, if you don't want to donate, totally cool. Come anyway, sign up. You'll get our newsletter. We need to build this. It's not just about me. It's about the movement. It's about, you know, stopping global warming and dealing with the climate issue and saving our planet. And obviously, it's about environmental justice, accountability for these polluters.
Yeah.
Okay, to answer that question, though, I mean, thank you for that. What Chevron has done in Ecuador is they went in, drilled, took the good stuff, that is the marketable oil, ran it through pipelines to refineries, brought it up to the United States, sold it, made billions of dollars. The bad part, that is the water production, the drilling muds, the stuff that comes with oil, wherever you drill, there's waste. They just dump that into the environment at almost zero cost to themselves. If this was the United States, they would have had to pay for a proper waste disposal, at least in most states, and it would have cost them an additional many millions of dollars to do it that way. So to save a certain amount of money, that is to increase their already high profits to obscene levels, they decided to socialize the costs onto the most vulnerable people of the planet, indigenous groups. They just dumped it and let them deal with it. And, you know, call it what you want. To me, it's privatizing profits, socializing costs. Another way to look at it is they're stealing. I mean, they're stealing. In other words, they took the wealth of the people in Ecuador out of the country, enriched their shareholders and the management, and left the people who had this totally prosperous environment for thousands of years with a completely poisoned existence and they become impoverished, and they've had to move away, and they've lost much of their culture and their language and their cohesion and their lives.
See, that to me is a genocide. That's a genocide.
It's a genocide or ecocide or whatever you want to call it. I mean,
people are dying when they lose their access to water.
It's a crime. And the people who made these decisions and carried them out, I think, are criminally, they're not just civilly liable, they're criminally culpable in my mind.
Yeah. And where is the government of Ecuador in this? Like, where do they fall into any of this? I mean, you got a ruling in your favor there.
Yeah.
And where are they in terms of enforcing that?
Well, this is a private lawsuit between private citizens and a private company, just to be clear. The government is not a party to the lawsuit.
No, but in terms of enforcing the judgment that, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But the government of Ecuador is an important player here, and they really should, A, do more to deal with the problem, and B, defend the hell out of their own country's courts and the judgment, and they have done that to a degree. But ultimately, I want to be very clear. The one entity that made the decision to dump the toxic waste is Chevron, not the government of Ecuador. Right. Chevron is 100% responsible. It doesn't mean the government shouldn't be doing things in the meantime. They should, okay? It is their country and people are dying. And the Ecuador government needs to do a lot more. But, every time they do more, Chevron just says, oh, it's not our responsibility. It's their responsibility. They're dealing with it. We don't have to pay the judgment. It's a little bit delicate, but Chevron needs to pay the judgment. Ecuador's government needs to do everything it can in the meantime to save lives.
Yeah.
A good friend of the show, Jordan Chariton, who you may know of Status Quo, he's been covering the poison pipelines in Flint, Michigan for, I think, 7 years now. And it took him for years for him to get a single story in The Intercept in order for them to run it. When you're coming for big oil, they will buy off whoever they have to buy off in order to make a story go away.
I've seen that happen time and time again with the media over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, reporters start down with a story and then it just dies.
Well, we will always harp back to the two biggest legislative things that happened over the course of what I guess you would say is when Reaganomics really took shape. But the elimination of the Fairness Doctrine in 87, then, of course, the Telecom Act in 96, was really the power consolidation period where, corporate media just became the fourth estate, where if you need anything protected in terms of corporate special interests, you just ship it to MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News, and they will do your bidding for the price. And that's what happens. They will not cover this because it is not in the corporate special interests of those who give to these shows in order for the story to get out there. And the truth is, this story's everywhere. We all know what roughshod, big oil is running over this planet. But now we have an opportunity to really highlight just how ruthless they are by trying to rewrite the rule of law in the United States, because that's what they're trying to do here.
Yeah.
We see people everyone would always talk about how, Trump is pillaging the Constitution and all that. The stuff that doesn't get talked about is really what pillages the Constitution, because they don't want this to become a story. They don't want people to actually think that this country isn't bought off by special interests. It is. And if we can do our part, as Katie has done her part, and everyone else does their part, this story needs to get out there, because this is serious, and this will have far-reaching ramifications if this is allowed to continue, because it's only getting worse. I mean, as you know, Exxon knew back in 1977 what they were doing, and they were able to make it go away. Mm-hmm. You can only imagine how much worse this is going to get. I mean, we live in Florida, so you can only imagine how devastating of an environmental circumstance we live in every day. Yeah. If we even attempt to fight back against Big Sugar, NextEra Energy, any of these major organizations, and we have an impact, I can't even imagine the type of hammer that they're going to bring down against any type of environmental movement here. So we must set the precedent.
And look, this is why these corporate interests have focused so much in the last 20, 30 years on controlling the courts, because ultimately many of these battles are going to be decided by judges, and they want those judges to be pro-corporate. And, you saw this, obviously you saw what Mitch McConnell did to Merrick Garland when Obama nominated him. You saw what Trump did over the last 4 years working with Mitch McConnell to stack the entire federal judiciary with young, right-wing, and many unqualified judges.
Oh.
And you can't go into a federal appellate court in the United States anymore and get a fair panel if you're representing poor people or victims of human rights or victims of pollution. I mean, the panels are it doesn't mean you can't win, but it's harder to win. It structurally favors the corporation all the time. The judges almost always come out of the corporate law firms, or they're former federal prosecutors with kind of a conservative bent. I'm generalizing, but I'm telling you, this is true to a great extent now in our country. And that's why I think people need to, among other things, and there's been great citizen activism and great victories. I mean, you saw what happened at the Exxon and Chevron shareholder meetings yesterday. They got spanked by their own shareholders over climate issues. So there's so many ways to make progress, but we need to understand that if we don't focus on making our courts fair, as opposed to just a weapon for the corporate right, we are not going to be able to solve many of these problems that really pose an existential threat to our existence, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, the judiciary has definitely been very contaminated at an exponential rate over the past, I'd say, few years, in a way that it's just going to have such lasting repercussions. And I look at the Supreme Court justices that were appointed by Trump, and it's freaking me out. Like the fact that Kavanaugh never tried a case. He never tried a case.
Can you imagine?
I mean, no. And it's like, I sit here and it's
has Amy Coney Barrett even tried a case?
No, she hasn't. These are people that are basically being bred to be in the positions that they're in. They're essentially being groomed into these positions. And it's a little Stepfordish and creepy. And, I sit here and I always have Thurgood Marshall over my shoulder. And I think, this is somebody who tried 32 cases before the Supreme Court, before he was appointed to the Supreme Court. And now we have justices that have never tried a case. And I just think.
You make an excellent point. Thurgood Marshall, one of the greatest lawyers and jurists in the history of our country, maybe the greatest, given what he had to overcome, what he was facing, would never, in today's political environment, get on the Supreme Court.
No.
Even though he's more qualified than anyone currently on it.
Yeah. But way too revolutionary, way too representing regular people. But,
the corporate world, when he got on the court, did not have the power and control of our government like it does today. And I can tell you, I'm older than y'all, but I'm not going to tell you my age. But I've seen a trajectory since Ronald Reagan was elected of just increasing corporate consolidation of power in the United States of America, to the point where, in my situation, I'm being prosecuted criminally by Chevron. And, this is the fundamental battle of our time. There's a lot of battles. There's income inequality. There's police racism. There's so many problems right now in our country. But I can tell you that the corporate control of our society either creates many of these problems or exacerbates existing ones to such a degree you can't really propose serious solutions to them, because our legislative branches don't know how to solve problems anymore because they're so worried about the corporate contributions. So we have a serious fundamental problem with how our democracy, if you want to call it that, is structured at the moment. And there's just way too much money and too much control by the rich and by the corporations to really do things in a fair way. And these problems just manifest again and again and again over all sorts of issues year after year, and nothing seems to get better. And I'm telling you, in my view, it's because of what I'm dealing with personally. There's just the corporations, the unlimited money has created a situation where I really question whether we really have a democracy anymore. We have some form of a distorted democracy, but we just don't have a legislative branch that can deal with our problems, in any kind of fundamental way.
I don't think. Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.